Hello everybody, I'm not going to waste any time and let's get into this video. You better read the title because this is what you're in for. The three categories that I will be comparing today are human-driven story, Godzilla design, and atomic breath. I would very much appreciate it if you watched the entire video, but if you don't have the time for that, just go into the pinned comment and click on the timestamp you want to see. As well, I would like to remind you that this is my opinion. This does not have to be your opinion, and it doesn't have to apply to your views of either of these movies. So let's start with the human-driven story. I want to start off with Godzilla -1 for this one. I am going to be assuming that you have seen the movie prior to this, but just as a brief summary, the movie is about a kamikaze pilot that failed to do his mission and came back to Japan with nothing. Then this woman comes up to him and begs him to help her with the child that she is carrying because the mother of the child gave it to her with no particular reason. And I don't think I have to really say too much, but this story is amazing. The idea of it connects so well with the Godzilla themes. It's so well crafted too. And the fact that you spend more time with this family than actually Godzilla is saying something because honestly, personally, and I think for a lot of people actually are really invested with this story. And just a little bit off topic, but whenever a movie makes me cry, I always want to say that it does, because it says something about this movie. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the ending of this movie made me burst into tears. This is cinema, which is a callback to my last video. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. The storytelling is so good, it connects to some of the best themes that I've seen in a movie this entire year, which is saying something because Oppenheimer came out this year too, and so did Barbie. The director of Godzilla -1 really knocked it out of the park, but let's move on to Shin Godzilla. Again, I'm assuming that you have seen the movie, but I don't think there's actually really anything to say about the human-driven plot, except that it's really boring. And don't hate me for this, I think that some part of the movie is pretty okay. The human-driven plot is extremely boring. I do not care for any of these characters. Whenever something bad happens, it's not like I'm rooting for them. I'm not even rooting for Godzilla. I don't know who I'm rooting for in this movie. Because Godzilla's really cool, but he's bad. And these human characters are human just like me, but they're boring and they're one-sided. This movie almost made me fall asleep because of the human-driven story, because it's a lot of the movie is the human-driven story for some reason, and when it's just government officials being okay, we gotta get this person to do this thing, it's just not fun, it's not exciting at all, especially since it never stops, and it just keeps going throughout the entire movie. Now, moving on to Godzilla's design, I want to start off with Shin Godzilla first. Shin Godzilla's design at first didn't really stick with me because the eyes were a little bit too wide open, that it was a little bit distracting, but I think as the story progresses and learning that Godzilla is evolving each time that he comes back onto land, that's the most interesting part, because once he's fully evolved and once he's at his peak performance in this movie, he is cool. The idea of the radiation making his dorsal fin in the back red, purple, and sometimes white is really cool, and I absolutely give them props for that because this Godzilla is insanely amazingly made. Now moving on to Godzilla -1, I can say the exact same thing about it. Godzilla -1's Godzilla design is absolutely amazing. He is scary in this movie. He is menacing. And that's the thing that I look for into a Godzilla movie, that the 2014 films are just not hitting the mark with their Godzilla designs. The thing is, though, even though that I would say that Godzilla -1's design is scarier, I actually think that I prefer the Shin Godzilla one because of the changing colors in his dorsal fin. The idea of the radiation is really cool and really interesting, and actually makes a lot more sense for the atomic breath scene, which we're about to talk about in a second. But besides the atomic breath, I think I prefer Shin Godzilla's design because you can really see how huge he is compared to these buildings, while in Godzilla -1, he's just not as huge as I'd expect. Now moving on to probably the thing that people came here to see the most of, atomic breath. I would like to start off with Shin Godzilla once again. Shin Godzilla's design complements the idea of the atomic breath. And the design of the atomic breath is also really cool in how he actually uses it. Because he has to, first of all, get so heated up because of the radiation inside of his body that he can't go into the water and cool himself off. He has to let off all of that. And I think that's what makes the scene of him shooting his atomic breath so satisfying and absolutely incredibly visually. The fact it starts off as this big smoke wave, this shooting out of his mouth, and you can see it like going everywhere in the entire city, taking up every single road. And then all of a sudden, it turns into fire as soon as he blinks his eye. And the fire decimates the entire city. The burning that it causes, all these buildings are just on fire. And then to top it all off, after he uses the fire, it becomes purple, and it becomes smaller, and it becomes a ray. And as soon as he moves around, buildings are sliced in two. It's insane how cool this scene is, and it's my favorite scene of the entire movie. But for Shin Godzilla fans thinking that I'd actually grow on this movie, you're wrong, because Godzilla Minus One's atomic breath is my personal favorite atomic breath ever done in any Godzilla movie. Which isn't saying too much because I haven't seen too many of them. But this is really cool. The slow buildup of each spike jolting out of his body with the blue radiation. All of a sudden for all of them to be jolting out of his back. As it gets faster and faster. And then all of a sudden he sucks in all this air and you can see an outline of all this atomic breath about to come. And then he fires it out. Not only blows past every single building in his path, but causes a nuclear explosion. Yeah, sure, Shin Godzilla has this ray that just slices anything in half, but Godzilla literally nukes Japan. Godzilla did Oppenheimer's work in seconds when it took Oppenheimer years to create it. But this nuke effect that Godzilla's atomic breath has is definitely the standout of the entire movie. But the thing is that as the story progresses, the atomic breath actually is really scary, especially in the final act of the movie. And it's the perfect allegory for World War II, especially with the idea of Japan getting nuked. I'm sorry to every Shin Godzilla fan out there. I'm just not as big as a fan as you are as I am with Minus One. I appreciate you stopping by. Thank you. Bye.